Welcome to the podcast. This week on the Tenant Podcast, we have Michael Ome Untiedt. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I want to ask you about your younger years, where you grew up, where you're from, and kind of talk about how you got started in art and how you became an artist.
Well, I was born in Lamar, southeastern Colorado. And then when I was quite young, it was after the war, my father and uncle came to Denver, and they started building houses. And my mother and my father built us a home where Westminster is now. Back then, it was a town of 300 people.
Wow.
And I lived there, and I lived in various places in East Denver. I went to school in Aurora. And then when I was, the beginning of high school, my grandfather, Cooney Brazzi, still farmed down near Lamar, and he had a heart attack, and I was sent down, and I lived with my grandparents and helped with the farm work, and I was there through my first year of college. I lived with my grandparents down there. Of course, I came to Denver all the time. So I kind of grew up in two worlds, I grew up in
the urban environment.
This urban environment, and also in this really old West kind of a long time ago kind of situation.
Right.
And I think that's reflected in my work today.
Sure.
I started out, I went to the University of Denver, and I was a psychology major. I first went as an art major, and I had a horrible experience.
Is that right?
Back then, my experience with the art classes back then were very experimental. I call it tacking canvas on the floor and pouring crap all over it. I mean, it just didn't. I wasn't getting the education I wanted, so I switched to psychology, and I was in a graduate program there, a pre-graduate program, to work on a doctorate in research psychology, and I was very unhappy in that, and my advisor, Bill, I can't remember his last name now. He suggested, he had worked with Studs Terkel when Studs Terkel wrote that book On Working.
Yeah.
And he understood being malcontent in what you were doing. And I graduated with an undergraduate degree, then I quit the program, and I bought an old truck, and I just knocked around for years in that truck trying to teach myself to paint and draw.
Okay.
And I guess it was maybe in the mid-'70s, I started to make more money. I was not making any money. I'd go to a trade state, Bowie, Texas, to try and sell watercolors, and I might sell a $5 watercolor in 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And it just wasn't much of an existence. And I eventually got a job teaching in the adult education things here in Aurora. And I stayed with my parents, and then I worked as the blacksmith in Fort Carpenter down when they were talking about rebuilding Bent's Fort. And then when the fort was rebuilt, I was the carpenter and blacksmith there for about a year or so. And
that was probably a pretty interesting experience.
Oh, it was great. It was like living your fantasy. I dressed like an old mountain man blacksmith, and I had to pretend like I was in the 1830s, and people would come by, and I'd do all this stuff like they did back then, either on the forge or in the wood shop, and it was wonderful. I guess to make a long story short, after that, I did a lot of knocking around, traveling around, and eventually I came to Denver, and I went back to school, and I got a teaching certification in industrial technology, and I taught wood shop, metal shop, and such in high school and middle schools, and I did that full time for quite a while, and then in 1999, it was right after the Columbine shootings. And our school that I was teaching in at the time, we had an outbreak of meningitis. So we were quarantined, and several of the students died. And
oh, no.
Oh, wow.
that combined with Columbine and hassles I had with administration, I quit teaching and I went to doing art full time. But for the last 10 years I taught, I was painting and selling 25 to 50 paintings a year anyhow. So it was pretty easy to transition into just painting. And so for the last 20 years, that's all I've done is painting and supporting a family with that kind of income.
And you also have a degree in, or you went to school for art history too, right?
No, but I did.
Okay.
I did take a lot of art history classes.
Okay.
No, I was in my mid-40s. I tried to get into the University of Texas doctoral program in art history, and they told me I was past my intellectual prime.
What?
Yeah.
My God.
Bunch of baloney that is.
No doubt.
Yeah. So, and I couldn't really afford it anyhow. But no, I actually have a degree in psychology and BS degree in industrial technologies.
Okay.
But it was really that Bill Kyle, I wish I could remember his last name. It was his encouragement to drop out of this graduate program because I was so bloody unhappy.
Right.
And just do what you want to do. Right. And it took me a long time to get around to art because I wasn't raised in that environment. I think I was probably 22 years old before I ever walked inside a gallery. I didn't even know they existed.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
I didn't know people could paint things and sell them. It just never clicked with me.
So was that pretty eye-opening, that first time that you walked into a gallery?
Well, I was just shocked. I can remember I was down in Taos, and I walked down on the plaza, and there were these galleries and stuff, This was, I don't know, probably 1975, something around there. And I had never been in a gallery. And I walked around, and I was just amazed. Wow, look at this person makes beautiful baskets, and they sell them. And, oh, my gosh, this guy does sculpture. And look they sell them. And I saw these wonderful paintings, and I thought, holy mackerel, these people actually sell them. And I remember one of the artists I saw was, I don't know if he's still alive or not. He was from Pueblo. His name was Joe Mendoza, and he did beautiful watercolors. And I saw one of his watercolors in this gallery, and I thought, wow, and look, he's from Colorado. You can do this from Colorado. And so I was kind of laid around and very, very, very naive. I mean, when I first tried to sell paintings, I hung around down in Texas a lot. And I had an old truck, and I'd pull my pickup into a trade days, and there might be a guy selling sheep here, and this guy had old washing machines, The trade days were kind of like flea markets.
Right.
Another guy would have a pen full of cows. And I've just got the back of my pickup open, and I lay some watercolors on there on the tailgate. And I trade them for gas or sell them for a couple dollars or whatever.
Right.
And I had no clue about any of this.
I bet that was a huge learning experience, though. And I imagine that was pretty, even though you weren't making a ton of money, you learned, not only did you learn a lot, but there's a freedom there.
You know what I think what was most important? It humanized me in my art. Because one of the things I want people, I never do a painting that's just a picture of something. I always want it to be something more than itself. But I want it to be something that anybody can relate to. Whether they're a Norwegian fisherman or a guy walking on the streets in Virginia Beach. And I think all that experience of just this being so naive about things, and therefore spending most of my time out with humanity instead of the art world, I think as I look back, I think that was really important for me and the way I do my art. And I don't know how I think it was very beneficial. And I didn't realize at the time, but I think it was, real benefit.
So basically you're self-taught then in the style that you're doing.
Well, I studied art at the University of Denver for, I guess 2 years.
Okay.
And, I say it was a horrible experience, but it also forced me to learn things that I would never have learned or studied. And then during all this time, one time, I took some classes at Art Students League of Denver when they very first started. And I became friends with Bruce Cody and Buffalo Kaplinski. Buffalo still lives down in Elizabeth. I took a lot of classes from Buffalo, and actually then I became his, I don't know what you call it, the guy who takes care of his class. He'd show up once a month, and I would be there 3 times a month.
Okay, right.
And I haven't seen Buff in a couple years, but he was a real artist, a very fine artist, and I learned so much from him about just the strength of character you have to have and the belief in yourself to be an artist. So, I got a good, really, I don't feel like I'm self-taught. I just feel like I got a lot of great education from a lot of unusual venues.
Right. Kind of almost like a journeyman experience or apprenticeship kind of thing. Yeah.
And, I think that's been all to my benefit.
Sure.
In the long run, but it's taken me, I'm not a spring chicken anymore.
But you're very successful.
Well, I make a living, and people know about my art. And just last night I got an email from a man. I believe he lives in Texas, but he purchased a painting from me, not from me, from a gallery I used to do business with, Bozeman, called Chaparral Gallery. They've been out of business for years now. This had to have been around 2000, 2005, somewhere in there. I did a painting. The Chaparral Gallery used to have this summer show, and I'd take work up. And I had this odd drive to do this one painting, and it was of a spring house with water coming towards you, some trees. And it was a friend of mine, an old rancher I'd met out wandering around. His name was Harry Figgins, and he used to have a ranch south of Bozeman on Cottonwood Creek. And the ranch is now long gone, of course. He died, and it's all trophy homes. But back then, I'd met Harry, and I'd visit him, and I'd go out and paint in his pastures, and sometimes he'd be out on horseback, and he'd stop. He'd just watch me paint. And even one time, I remember the people at Chaparral Gallery said, there was this old cowboy that came in and spent an hour in here looking at paintings, and he was so quiet and attentive. And Harry later told me that was the only time in his whole life he'd ever been in a gallery. But I felt drawn to, I did this painting of this spring house that Harry's dad had built in 1913 when they founded that farm there on the Cottonwood Creek. And I went up, took the painting up to Chaparral, and I dropped it off the gallery, and I drove out to Harry's place, only 15, 20 miles away. I was going to visit him for a while and then go back in for the opening. Well, I went out to Harry's place, and his pickup was in the shed, but no one was around. And I hunted for him, thought, no, I didn't. He's gotten sold by then. He wouldn't have been out on horseback somewhere. So I went back into town, and at the reception, someone told me, Harry Figgins, he died last week.
No.
He died on the night I finished that painting of the spring house. Wow. And I had such a compulsion to take that painting.
Yeah.
Well, you'd think the story ends there, right? It doesn't. This guy who emailed me yesterday, his name is Bob Morgan, something like that. He said, I was just passing through Montana, and I stopped at a friend's in Livingston. They said, there's a nice gallery over in Bozeman. He said, I'm going to go over and check it out. He said, I went and I saw it, and I saw your painting, and he said, I bought it off right then and there. And I remember selling the painting, and I never met the person. And he said, I then went and called my friends. He was from San Antonio. I called my friends who were organizing a show it's now called The Night of the Artist. And it's a big deal show now. It's one of the top 5 shows in the country.
Wow.
And out of the blue, someone invited me to this show. Well, it was because I found out last night, this guy had called the committee. He was on the committee and said, hey, you probably ought to get this guy in it. And they looked at it, he said, yeah, but he just does landscapes. He said, yeah, but I don't think he's going to be satisfied with that. So it's like this great, big, long story evolved, as well as kind of my art career, off of this old rancher I met up one day. He's out fixing fence, and I asked him, "Hey, can I paint out there in your pasture?" And we developed a friendship, and it just grew and grew and grew. But there was always kind of this esoterical thing going on.
It's crazy how the universe works sometimes.
Yeah. And that's the education, how my career is built. It's like that.
Yeah.
I can't claim that to be self-educating.
Right.
But man, the education I've got's come from so many wonderful different directions.
Right.
And I think you talk to a lot of artists. It's that way.
Yeah.
It's you can go and study pictures.
Right. Right.
And you can practice making pictures, but the thing of art is a lot more than that, and it's that combination of the stuff. And I hope I never lose that feeling of humanity.
Right. Right.
That all that seems to be directed from.
Well, I think you can tell in the paintings. We've both been on your website looking at your paintings, and you definitely get a feel of, number one, the humanity, and number two, a narrative. You can see a story developing in those. So
and I got poo-pooed a lot when I was studying art, or gallery curators, museum curators, about narrative, and I just feel like I like people to know why I paint something. So I write a lot of stories that go with it.
Yeah.
And the example I use is, there's a wonderful painting I think it's at the Met in New York. It was painted by Winslow Homer in 1866. It's called Veteran in a New Field. And it is just a guy in regular clothes, an old felt hat. His back is turned to you, and he's cutting wheat with a handsaw. And I don't know if you know the painting or not. I believe it's going to be at the Denver Art Museum in the spring.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But the backstory on that is Winslow Homer was a illustration correspondent for Harper's Weekly newspaper. And he traveled with the Grand Army of the Republic through the wilderness campaigns and all that stuff. And he was horrified by the war, by the boredom, and then the carnage. And he was very, very, very affected by the Civil War. And this painting is about that. It's a painting of redemption. Mm-hmm. The war is over. And if you know the backstory of his experiences and then why he painted it, you can't stand there with a dry eye.
Right.
It
changes the whole,
so
it changes the whole thing.
Important. Yeah. It's not a guy cutting wheat in a field. It's a statement about humanity, and the redemption, redeeming your humanness after years of horror and bloodshed.
Right.
And I just think that's important. And ever since I saw that years ago, I've been dedicated to. I want my paintings to represent something more than that. But people need to know the story. Otherwise, it might be a little obtuse.
Right. Well, and that series of paintings that you have on your website that kind of stood out for me was the Native American chief.
Oh, Quanah Parker.
That one, yes.
Yeah.
His mother was white, right?
His mother's name was Cynthia Ann Parker, and she was kidnapped in, I think, 1838 from her father's kind of farm fort. It was called Parker's Fort. It was a farming community in the Texas Hill Country. And she was raised by the Comanche. And she eventually became the wife of Comanche leader by the name of Peta Nakone. And she had Quanah and another son and a daughter. One of the sons was killed in a raid as a child.
Right.
And the daughter died of disease. And Cynthia Ann Parker was recaptured in the 1860s by some Texas Rangers, supposedly by Charles Goodnight, although I've never believed that story.
Okay.
Charles Goodnight was in the Rangers then. They had attacked the Comanche camp on the Pease River over near Vernon, Texas.
Right.
And recaptured Cynthia Ann Parker. And she never readjusted to life on back with white people. Mm-hmm. She just died a few years later of probably a broken heart. I believe she had her little girl with her, and the little girl died of some kind of disease. And Quanah Parker never saw her again, but he did, after the Comanche went into Fort Sill and surrendered, he did eventually have her reinterred at the cemetery in Oklahoma, and he's buried next to his mother there.
Oh, nice.
So and Quanah was half white and half Comanche. And of course, the last great war leader of the Comanche. And then later, he was a great tribal leader. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, it is an interesting story. In fact, I just started that book, Empire of the Sun.
Empire of the Sun, yeah.
And I'm just getting into it, but it's interesting. The Comanche were an interesting people. They were hardy.
Well, yeah.
You didn't want to mess with them.
They were just the plague of the Southern Plains. I mean, the Comanche, of all the native peoples down in that country, they didn't really have a culture.
No, their structure wasn't.
They had no governmental structure.
Right.
They barely had a language. The language was many different dialects spread amongst the different groups. They didn't really have a religion. The thing that kind of bound them together was they raided. And they made their livelihood raiding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They were nomads.
They were complete nomads.
And they had a huge range. I mean, like hundreds
Their
and hundreds
range was
of miles.
from the Platte River to into Mexico.
Yeah.
They were the first Native Americans to get the horse. So they were always technologically ahead of other Plains tribes because they had so mastered the
being horsemen.
Being horsemen, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose from being in the southern areas because those horses came from the Spaniards. So so that would make sense.
Down where Coronado went through, the Spaniards.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they would decimate people, like even people that like cavalry that would go after these guys, because the cavalry would always want to get off their horses and fight, and these guys knew how to shoot.
Yeah.
Bows and arrows
off
their horses, riding sideways,
right,
and using their horses as shields, and they would just obliterate people.
The Texas Rangers. The Texas Rangers were formed as a protection against the Comanche from the north and Mexican outlaws and Mexican incursions from the southern border, and that all stems from. If you want to, would you like to hear a story about that? You mentioned it about the guns. Well. When the Republic of Texas wanted to join the United States, there was a lot of argument about that in Congress. Because one of the things was the Republic of Texas at that time had a national debt of about $12 million, which was an enormous sum of money for 1846. And a lot of the New England states did not want to assume that debt.
Right.
Well, the southern states wanted Texas brought in because they wanted it brought in as a slave state. Because all the backstory of all this is this battle about slavery and non-slavery and what's going to be a free state and what isn't going to be a free state.
Right.
Well, what eventually happened was Congress agreed to assume the Republic of Texas's debt. However, also in the agreement was that Texas didn't have to deed over any land to the federal government. So when you go to Texas today, there is no federal land. They have several national parks, like Big Bend National Park.
Right.
That had to be legislated by a special act of the Texas legislature because there's no federal land in Texas.
Interesting.
Well, so a lot of the northern congressmen in 1846 were really pissed off about all these concessions they were making to the state of Texas to join the Union. So they refused to fund the Army properly to protect the border. And from 1846 up until about the First World War, the federal government really didn't get a hoot about the southern borders. That was Texas's problem.
Okay.
And that's why the Texas Rangers were formed, to protect people, because for 25 years after that, there was still contention between Mexico and the United States about what the southern boundary was. The Mexicans believed it was the Nueces River, not the Rio Grande. And so there were a lot of problems. And there was a lot, just like there is today, there was a lot of outlawry and lawlessness in northern Mexico. And the place to go was, there was more money to steal in Texas than in the deserts of Mexico. So the Rangers were formed for that. In addition, the Comanche had been pushed off the Central Plains even further south, and so they started raiding Texas. So they were getting it from both sides. Texas Rangers were formed to help protect the citizens of Texas. Well, you're absolutely right. What little support the U.S. Army gave to Texas were infantry troops, which against the Comanche was absolutely no help at all. Right. They were just mouths to feed.
Right.
And the Rangers were supplied with single-shot, muzzle-loading pistols and rifles. Well, a Comanche warrior could accurately shoot 10 arrows a minute under his horse's neck, mounted, in the time it took a ranger to reload and fire a musket possibly twice. And they had to be on the ground, standing, to fire it accurately. Along comes a Texas Ranger named Sam Walker. And Samuel Walker was good friends with a man in New England named Samuel Colt. And he helped him develop what was first known as the Walker Colt. And it was a 5-shot repeating pistol. And the state of Texas bought enough of those to supply their Rangers with them. And most Rangers got 2 pistols and 2 cylinders, because it was easier to reload the cylinders, to just pop in a new cylinder than so they had 20 shots they could fire off of horseback, and it completely changed the situation of warfare with the Comanche in Texas, and eventually the domination of the Plains Indians was that ability to fight mounted and fire more shots than an Indian could shoot with his bow and arrow.
Yeah.
And there again, it's an interesting thing about this affecting this affecting this affecting. It's kind of that Harry Figgins thing.
Right, right, yeah.
They're interesting people in that because they roam so far and so wide, these guys would follow them, try to track them too, and they couldn't do it because they'd run out of food and water. Like they'd be out in these plains and there wasn't...
That's what that painting's about. That's the Llano Estacado, West Texas. That's what I painted that about, is a ranger, and he's debating whether, do I go out there or not? Because
you're rolling the dice.
Not only do you go out there, you got to come back.
Right.
And the Comanche knew it, and they just were lords of those plains for years and years and years and years.
Really interesting people.
Yeah. The dynamics. And of course, another Indian people that were there at the same time were the Kiowa, who were great horse masters like the Comanche, but the Kiowa were more buffalo hunters, and they didn't rely on as much on raiding. The Comanche, their culture was based on raiding. It always had been. It was taking somebody else's stuff.
Yeah,
right.
Because they didn't,
They didn't hunt a lot like the Kiowa did. They raided Mexico. They raided Texas. That was how they supplied themselves, was pretty much raiding. They didn't farm. And they were, kind of like Mongols.
Yeah, right. And the white man couldn't get them to concede because they didn't adhere, like you said before, they didn't adhere to your typical structure. So they didn't care about treaties or anything.
And they didn't really have leaders.
Right. It's like...
Quanah Parker was more of a spiritual leader. People just admired him. And then, of course, when they went on the reservations, he became a spokesman for them. But they were just a different world.
Yeah, and the white man couldn't wrap their heads around that whole thing, not having any kind of structure, which they were used to, right?
Right. And that was true with a lot of the Plains Indians. The federal government always thought they were dealing with structure, like Congress or something. Yeah. There never really was with any, even a highly sophisticated bunch like the Cheyenne. They didn't really have one leader. And leaders were leaders for different things. And also they didn't have the concept of that this is mine and I can sell it to you. It's mine because I'm here. Right. Kind of thing, it's destined to end bad.
So let me ask you this. You obviously have an affinity for Texas. You kicked around there
for
a number of years. What is that? What drew you to Texas?
You know what still draws me to Texas is Texans live their history. History is important to them. They cling to those stories that I love to collect and paint about. But people aren't distanced from history like here. Here, well, first of all, there are very few native people here.
Right.
You know, and so they may have not had access to those stories. Whereas in Texas, what went on in the past, it's a big part of today down there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what draws me to Texas. You know, they have thousands of little historical markers all over the state saying this happened. You know, I'll go down there and, I'll talk to someone and, oh, yeah, my granddad said this and this and then and this and this. And I run into a really cool story. I'll give you an example. One time I was drinking beer in a sleazy old bar in Trinidad about 10 years ago. And I ran into these two crazy cowboys. And I can't remember the one's name. He was a world champion bull rider at one time. I should remember his name, but I don't. And the other guy was a rancher from South Texas, South San Antonio. And we were drinking beer in this place. And they found out I was a painter, and we were swapping stories and lies. And this one rancher told me, I told him how I had this interest in the Rangers. He said, I've heard this story. My granddad told me this story about the Rangers. He said, and the story is that when the Rangers went into South Texas, they were supposed to bring law and order to the area, what they call the Nueces Strip, that contested area in South Texas. And he said, the captain, Leander McNally, and he got the name right, really was, Leander McNally. This is told in 2010, and this happened in 1870, right? And he said when McNally was sent down to be in charge of this company of Rangers, a good friend of his in San Antonio, Dick Hayes, and that's true, there really is, the old Hayes Library is not far from the Alamo. I went and found it in San Antonio. The building's still there. But his friend Dick Hayes was a saddle maker and had a livery stable. And someone stole a string of his mules and 10 Hayes saddles that he was new saddles. And then this rancher told me. And so when McNally got down there with this company of Rangers, he told him, I am personally affronted by these people stealing my good friend's mules and saddles. So he said, if you see anyone riding a Hayes saddle, shoot first and ask questions later. And then the rancher kind of laughed. He said, and at the end of a month, those Rangers turned in 18 saddles, and nobody to this day knows if any of them were the stolen ones. So I go out and research this story, and it's just like that. And this real rancher is telling me this story from that long ago.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
But that happens all the time. I'll run into people, and they'll have some story about the Alamo, that happened to some ancestor. And Texas is just, it doesn't separate itself from history. Mm-hmm. And New Englanders are a little bit that way, but it's a little bit more because you aren't kind of thing,
Right. They're kind of like holding that out to you.
Yeah. In Texas, it's just like, well, my shoes are brown, and my granddad was at the Alamo kind of thing.
Right.
It's history they're a part of history down there. And that's why I'm so drawn to Texas. Yeah,
and their history is really rich with stories.
And there's so many wacky, cool people.
Right.
I mean, no place in the world collects wackiness like Texas. You meet the weirdest, coolest people in Texas.
Uh-huh. Do you go down there every year?
Yeah, I go down.
To paint?
I usually go down there 2 or 3 times a year to paint. Okay. I do a big show at the Briscoe Museum in San Antonio. That's always in end of April. And I have good friends up in North Texas around Nocona, and I try to get up there and visit them. Nocona was named after Quanah Parker's husband, or father. And I try to get up and visit them. And then usually in September or so, I'm down there for something. So I go down there. Well, growing up in Lamar, we were halfway. It was just as close to go to Amarillo as it was Denver. And so it wasn't much different than being in Texas. So,
So that probably influenced your desire. Well, you know, and going to Fort Bend and,
Yeah.
you know, that whole thing just really influences you, what you're painting now and
Yeah.
everything. So,
yeah, I really like studying history and just I try to paint something that says something that people can relate to today. I don't try to isolate them from the event.
right.
Like right now, I'm working on a piece. I was imagining rangers down on the Guadalupe, down South Texas, and what it'd be like just an ordinary day, you know, and you're pausing for a minute, and like our ordinary days are.
Right.
You know, it's not a shoot 'em up thing. It's not a boredom thing. It's just a moment.
Yeah, 3 rangers
Yeah.
near the creek. The horse is drinking out of the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. So when you paint in the field, I just find that interesting, you know, and I know a lot of people do that. They'll go set up and they'll paint. Are you just kind of capturing a study and then try to go in more depth later?
Yeah. You just, the light changes so quickly.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to get a good painting done. So I go out there for practice, you know, and I like to do it. It's so nice to just sit out there and it's just you and the paint and it's quiet and, you know, but the light changes really fast. So it's difficult when you have to make quick decisions. You can't decide on composition, all this stuff you got to think about. You just kind of react to what's out there. Now, I was just at the Monet exhibit, and, you know, Monet painted a lot out on location. But what a lot of people don't understand with Monet is he had a little painting cart, you know, it was like a hand cart, and it had all these slots. He could have 20 canvases on the cart at any time. And he'd wheel this around, and he'd work on a scene until the light changed. Then he'd put it away, and he might not be back for 10 or 15 days. And when the light he thought was the same again, and he'd be back and work on it some more. So it was a little different approach than just going out there and doing a little sketch quickly. Although he did a lot of that too. But you wouldn't believe how much better you get at putting paint on the canvas when you work at putting it on quickly, and it loosens your brushwork up, and it's just nice to do.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to get a good painting done out there because, you know, it's easier to bring those back and work on it.
As opposed to taking a photograph and then painting from the photograph.
Yeah, and I'll use photographs too sometimes, although if you sit out there and paint it, you understand it.
Yeah.
If you take a photograph, you still don't really know it.
Right.
There's a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah. You know, it's and a lot of times, you know, if you photograph landscapes, the camera's not good at recording it because it tends to flatten things a little bit. And so, you know, if you're out there painting in location, it's much easier for me to work off a painting sketch than a photograph.
Okay.
Because I sat out there and I understand what I'm looking at.
Right. Longer experience with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You really get a sense of the place.
Yeah.
You're sensing the light.
Yeah.
Listening to the birds, whatever.
Yeah. And sometimes that's really important, you know? And a lot of times I'll go out and I'll just make a little ink sketch and write notes on it. That's all I do out on location. And I could do a painting from that oftentimes. And I might take some photographs if there's a certain kind of light happening. I might take a photograph of something so I have some kind of reference of what the light looked like. But that's all I'm taking a photograph of is the quality of that light.
Sure.
And then use those sketches, and I'll go from there. And I think a lot of artists do that. You know, I once read that there's a really famous Western artist. His name is Frank Tenney Johnson, and he's noted for his night paintings. And Frank Tenney Johnson came out west in about 1904. He worked up on a ranch up near Steamboat. Then he traveled through the Southwest, and he took a bunch of photographs, and he sent them back to his wife in New York City, and she compiled these archives of his photographs. And over his lifetime, he took maybe 14,000 photographs. And I read that a curator who knows his whole body of work went through the photographs and could only identify 2 paintings.
Really?
Wow.
Well, that told me that he was doing exactly what I do. He was capturing light, you know, like what does the light look like on that rock when there's water underneath it, say, or something. You know, stuff like that. he wasn't interested in the whole thing. He was interested in little memory references for particularly what light does. That tells me that's what he was doing because he sketched a lot also. And Charles Russell didn't even own a camera. He did everything from sketches and from memory. He rarely painted out on location.
Okay.
I worked for a rancher once whose father had ridden up in the Judith Basin with Charlie Russell. And he said they'd be out on horseback, go in at night. Charles Russell would draw stuff he saw during the day. And he just had a photographic memory for things he looked at. And he didn't rely on a camera at all.
Right.
Not at all. And so I like these kinds of things, I just make them up. If they have cowboys and anatomy in them, how to get a reference for that? I don't want to go to these photo shoots.
Right.
They look like photo shoots.
Right.
And I just make everything up. And I've painted, I don't know how many thousands of paintings, so I have a good memory file now. But yeah, sometimes I'll take a photograph if it's really spectacular light or something, maybe because it's quick.
Yeah.
And then I'll go out and paint on location. That's kind of a luxury anymore because it's the studio work that I can sell.
Right,
so
right.
I can't afford to spend a lot of time
Traveling and then
out on location.
So is there a specific, I know you like to travel and you paint when you travel, but is there a specific place that you go back time and time again that you find inspiring that you go to paint?
My second favorite place to paint besides here in the United States is in Ireland. I painted in Ireland a lot.
And why is that?
It's one of those Harry Figgins connections. My grandfather, who I lived with, was a World War I veteran. He was a sailor on the USS Nevada, which was a dreadnought battleship in the United States Navy that was assigned to the British fleet at Scapa Flow in Scotland. When he went off to war, he was from southern Colorado. He'd never been away from home. He was very homesick. And they made port in Ireland for 3 months. And he said he got over his homesickness there because the people were just like the people at home. And so when I was even when I was a little boy, he had these photographic albums of this place in Ireland in 1917 that he felt was like home. About 20 years ago, I decided I wanted to take a painting break. And I was just going to go somewhere by myself and paint for a while. And I was looking at places in New England and places in Europe. And I settled on this artist retreat in County Cork, Ireland. And I went there and had a great time. And I painted there for years. And actually, I did a whole project on painting the connections between that place and Butte, Montana, because a lot of the Irish from that area immigrated to Butte to work in the copper mines because there were copper mines there. And there were a lot of connections. That's a whole nother story. But about 5 years ago, and I've done all this, I haven't been back there 7 or 8 years, but I found an account of the ship's diary online of this battleship. And the place they made port was the same place I picked out to go to in Ireland.
Wow.
And I don't know if I knew it unconsciously, and that's why I picked it out. But it's that Harry Figgins thing all over again, These weird, bizarre connections. But that's a place I really like painting is in Ireland. And I think it's because they're close to their history, and the history is ancient.
Yeah, the Irish really are close to their history.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. So how do you feel about, we'll change gears just a little bit, how do you feel about traditional art education? You think it's worth it? It's a question I've asked a lot of different people,
Yeah.
a lot of artists.
It's hard to say because, like my daughter's she's studying commercial art right now.
Okay.
And I'm paying for it.
Locally?
And down in town. And, it's expensive.
It is expensive no matter where you go.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it is or not. If you're a person who's undisciplined, I think it's good. Because if you can't discipline yourself to do the work and discipline yourself to do it when you don't feel like doing it,
Right.
you're never going to be an artist. And I just think sometimes art school can be that kick in the butt to keep you going. You have to learn that, or it's never going to happen. On the other hand, to spend $50,000 to learn art history,
Right.
It's all right there, and it's all for free on the internet.
Right.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Or as our friend Bob Ragland would say, go to your library.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Of course, I haven't been in a university in 40 years, and I don't think it's changed that much. I learned nothing there that was going to help me make a living as an artist, unless I was going to go get a PhD in art history and get on a tenure line at some university. I would never have learned to be an artist there.
And I would imagine, where your daughter's going to school, they probably have quite a few students that are going through a program. And then, what are they going to do with this art, major? Now, I know you can go teach high school, middle school, or go to a university, break into your own. But I just think the return on the investment, it's a long journey.
Well, if you ever get a return, art is about mastering something. Mm-hmm. It's the process of mastering something. And I'm not going to say it's the mastering of painting.
Right.
I believe art is the mastering of something.
Right.
All right. And then you're able to translate that into something that's communicable to someone else who has the wherewithal to pay for it.
Right.
That's the livelihood of art. Well, I just know in the art experiences I've had at universities and such. And I've done several artist in residence things at those kinds of places. The staff, everyone's really naive about making a living as an artist. And they almost look down upon it. You're putting commercial considerations into what do you do. Well, yeah, I got to, or my family isn't going to eat.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
And it has always been that way. My wife and I just watched a wonderful movie about Van Gogh last night. Well, his brother Theo kept buying all his work.
Right.
He never sold his work to anyone else, but Theo kept
Van Gogh in business.
Well, I tell people when they, I get phone calls from parents, what art school should I send my kids to? And I said, well, if you have a lot of money, this is a nice school. I said, you're not going to learn to be an artist there. I suggest to them, what do they want to do? And if they like jewelry, I say, I don't know. I'd go to the Cherry Creek Art Festival. I'd pick out some jewelers I really liked and said, hey, can I sweep your floors and wash your truck and schlep your stuff at shows and for room and board, and I would like to learn how to be a jeweler. I said, that's what I would do if I were their age. But I said, they probably don't want to do that. Or I tell them, get a job. I was a carpenter. I mean, the reason I got the job at Bent's Fort was I knew how to do old-time woodworking because my uncles and my dad taught it to me. Mm-hmm. And we still did a lot of stuff that way.
Right.
I was a welder. I could always support myself when I couldn't make any money selling watercolors out of the back of a pickup truck.
Right.
You had the skill set.
Yeah.
That you learned from your family that was passed on to you that you just needed to know in order to, work on the ranch or farm or whatever.
And so I could always get by. And I think that's important. And teaching is a nice thing to do,
right?
And it affords you time to do stuff. You're never going to be a great artist until you completely commit to it, which is another scary thing. But teaching is a nice thing to go into, to have some time to start perfecting that mastery, that whatever it is.
It gives you a stable income and enables you to...
Or you marry someone with a lot of money or a good job.
There you
go. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But you got to do that. And art schools don't say that.
Right.
They just get very esoterical about this and that, and they're not very realistic about, you have to exist in the world. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. like I've told you, the stuff I've learned to be an artist from a university, I did not get.
Right.
I did not get,
Yeah.
I was down at First Friday last night, and I met this young woman, and I was talking to her, and she's actually still in school at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. And I was asking her, because I went to art school here in Denver at what used to be the Art Institute.
Yeah.
CIA is what it was known at the time, Colorado Institute of Art. And in my 2 years there, I got 1/4 of like marketing business type of thing.
And it's all bullshit.
It is all bullshit. And so I was asking her, because I know times change and it's been a while since I've been in school. I said, so are they going to teach you, or do you get any business classes? Because she's getting a bachelor's. And, how many business classes or marketing classes do you get? And she said that her senior year, she'll get 2 semesters of classes that deal with marketing, promotion, and business type stuff, which is better than,
the thing
than
is
nothing, but I'm not sure that that is.
But the classes I've seen of that, they teach traditional business marketing, traditional business promotion, and it doesn't apply to art. The selling of art is a unique kind of marketing. It is the only thing that would be similar to it in business is the people that sell high-end traveling experiences, either resorts or
like Viking cruises or something like
well,
that. Or
that,
even
but
more,
very high-end,
high-end,
unique experiences.
Right.
That's the only thing that even closely resembles selling art, because you're not selling to traditional commodity-driven markets. And that business that they teach you does you no fucking good. It does not. And it's because none of them have ever made a living as an artist, and they don't understand the dynamics of how to make a living at art. And a big part of it is networking.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of it.
It is almost all of it. And I just feel like they completely miss the boat. The way they teach it is a waste of time. The things that are helpful is common business practices. Like, I think it's very important that you know how to write a business plan. Why? Because a business plan helps you organize your thoughts about how am I going to make a living at this.
Right.
So I'm a big proponent of that. Right. I'm a big proponent of financing. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's helped me over the years is my wife. Well, my wife had a good job, and I did years ago. Well, we invested in real estate. Real estate gives you leverage. And what leverage means is you have access to a cash flow when there's none there.
Yeah, you can borrow against it. Yeah.
And that's something that's useful to know as an artist. Or just what is financing and how do we go about it? I wrote business plans and put together little projects just so I could do it, so I knew I could raise money if I needed to. And Bob understands, down there at the street level, how to finance what you're doing. He's a master at it.
He is a master.
Yeah. And promotion, if people don't value you, the promotion does no good.
Right.
It's all perceived value in this thing. And you can't promote perceived value. You can build a brand, that might gain perceived value, but you can't say you are and promote it and it doesn't get you anywhere.
Right.
This field just doesn't work that way. I hate to sound like a sourpuss, but I feel like the wrong stuff is being taught.
Yeah.
Right.
You're a realist. So yeah. I don't think you're jaded or a sourpuss, but I think you're a realist, and I think that's the sell that these art schools. Yeah. They kind of convey this to the prospective students, but they don't really present a real picture. They don't. They're a business. They're trying to sell you something too.
Yeah,
they want you to buy into their
classroom
program.
seat.
Yeah, classroom seat. They want the numbers and they want your money. But the reality of it is that they don't give you all the tools. You may have a great foundation in how to create whatever you're going to create, and you can have incredible instructors, but it doesn't mean squat if you don't have the know-how to sell it.
What I tell people who come to the Thursday night thing, the studio nights things here, I tell them, listen, marketing and art is this. You have to understand, first of all, what you do. And you know what? A lot of artists aren't that focused. I tell them, you have to focus. As I said, if I want to be a professional basketball player, I don't go out and practice baseball more.
Right.
You know, I practice basketball. And I said, you have to focus on something. You can't do bouquet floral things over here and Jackson Pollock things over here and paint portraits over. I said, that doesn't work. You know, you've got to focus because you have to drive the mastery to a high level. And you can't do that on a million different things.
Right. Exploring things is like is one thing.
But then
you got to
realize,
right.
Here's what, and one of the first things I try to drive in their heads is I say, listen, I think one of the most important things you can do is come up with one sentence that's very poetical. And what that sentence does, it tells tells other people who you are and what you do. And mine I made up years ago was painting the world with a Westerner's eye.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
And I said, that helps you focus on yourself. Once you get that focus, then you have to start deciding, all right, if I have that focus, where are the people who appreciated that? And what's the dynamic that they work within? Mm-hmm. Well, for years I sold in the kind of the landscape market until it was overflooded and the crash came. And I knew I had to change. And that's when I started doing cowboy themed things. And I started doing them for several reasons. One, I came from that background. I understood it. I had a lot of emotion and feeling for it, a lot of personal understanding of it. And it's iconic. The cowboy and Western themes is iconography that's recognized the world around. Mm-hmm. And I can paint in that genre and say the things I want to say, and people will get it. They'll at least notice it because I don't have to fight. What is that?
Right.
You know, and that was kind of a marketing choice. Well, once I decided I was going to be more Western themed, then I started looking into, okay, well, where are the people who collect this? And I slowly over the years, I found that and I started understanding the dynamics. I understood this, I understood that. Well, most of the people that buy this stuff, they're buying more than a painting. They're buying a very meaningful experience that's bundled with it. So I have to sell this in beautiful places where it's tied in with a vacation, or, you know, a whoop-de-doo event like the Buffalo Bill auction or something. All right? And these people are looking for one-of-a-kind things. They do not want reproductions. They want a unique, one-of-a-kind thing. And third, they want it to be unique. And so what did I do? I brought my Buffalo Kaplinski taught palette to Western art. And I started trying to meet those. Oh, and the other thing is, they always want to buy it in a safe environment. All right? Where they feel comfortable purchasing it. Mm-hmm. Well, when I started understanding those dynamics, I start looking for places where I can meet those people in that dynamic and meet all those needs. And I was fairly successful doing that. You know, I can't stress how important that is, but nobody wants to go to that kind of trouble, I guess. Right, yeah. Very few people do that. Or they don't know. And I say, well, you know, you like doing abstract things. I said, you know, I think the dynamic for that, if you want to make big money, I know where the dynamic is. I don't know if you want to go there. And I said, and the dynamics of that market, is driven by promotion. If you're branded.
Right.
And so you've got to meet that dynamic. And landscape, I tell them, man, that's gotten so spread out over the whole country. I don't know how you make a living with it.
It's a hard road, that one, huh?
It's difficult. Why? Because in the last 15, 20 years, this plein air phenomena has occurred, and there's 50,000 people painting landscapes and trying to sell them, you know? And that's the dynamic, but it's one that's really spread out.
Yeah, it's saturated.
Totally saturated.
Yeah.
And but they don't teach that in schools. They don't even know how to talk about it. They have no concept of that.
And they really kind of set these kids up for failure.
Totally.
Because I remember the art school, that I went to, they would bring these kids through with their parents, and they're just about ready to graduate high school. And you get to see the look on these kids' faces. And I just wanted to pull these people. I probably would have been booted out of art school, but as the person giving the tour walks on, I wanted to just pull them aside and say, hey, here's the real deal here. I can see already that your kid is not, they're interested and they may be excited, but they're not all in on this. And you're going to spend a lot of money paying for your kid to go to this school. And this is towards the end of my education there. But I could already see the writing on the wall. I'm like, I have this great foundation in photography, but they're not teaching me anything about business.
That's why I think what Seth Hopkins is going to be talking about in June, how to help educate collectors, that's an important thing for artists to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
a two-sided
because
coin
what's
there.
that doing? That's recognizing that collectors have needs. When I know what their needs are, I want to make sure that my art and my business meets their needs.
Yeah.
That's marketing. All right? If you meet people's needs, the marketing is done. But just following these old rules of marketing that don't apply to what you do, you're just freaking spinning your wheels and spending your money. Just spending your money.
Absolutely.
So
I know you show that you have a number of galleries that show your work and sell your work. Do you have an agent of any sort?
No.
No.
You're
your own agent.
I'm my own agent. My daughter, who the art student, she's talking about she may become kind of like a manager, and in which case, if she does that, I'll probably pay her a commission. But most art agents, it never worked for me financially. I mean, typically they want 20%, and then they want to go put your work in galleries, and you're paying 40 to 50% there. And it just didn't make any sense.
They're taking a ton of the money right there.
Yeah, I have talked to agents, and they talked, a big deal, but it never made sense to me. Just because I'm not selling stuff for $100,000 a piece. And I suppose if I was getting huge money like that, that would make a lot more sense. But for what I sell paintings for, it wasn't realistic, which is another thing they should be teaching you about. That's one of the myths they still sort of propagate in business schools, is you've got to look for that angel. There are no art angels. There are no Vanderbilts out there or Steinhams who are going to take you under their wing and pay you $150,000 a year to paint them pretty paintings, and they're going to support you for the rest of their life. That never happens. It never happens. They don't exist. There's no one out there like that. And yet everyone thinks, I just got to find the right person.
Right.
Then they'll make my career. Now,
that's like hitting the Powerball.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I did back in the 90s when I was teaching and painting, I did encounter, I was doing Cherry Creek Arts Festival, and Deborah Melnick, who at the time had Third Canyon Gallery downtown in Writers Square, which was one of the premier Western art galleries in the country at that time. And Deborah saw my work and started handling it. And she did build me a national reputation because she believed in my work and she sold a lot of it. And I was in national magazines, 20 times a year. And she got feature articles written about me. And she's the closest thing to an angel. But it's that I had the work. I was doing good work.
Right.
I had the work to deliver to her, and I could meet her demands. And of course, then she eventually retired, got old, retired, quit, gone. It's no longer in the picture. But I will always be thankful for her because she really sort of jump-started me into a more national scene, But that's the only one I've ever run into like that. I was very fortunate, but I was in a position to take advantage of it also. And a lot of it was me. Right. Yeah, but that myth of, and I have really wealthy collectors, like Vanderbilt-like people. But they don't buy everything you paint, and you don't want to take advantage of people like that. And your career's not built on one person.
Right.
But over and over again, I hear young artists say, well, yeah, I got to meet that right person, and they'll get everything started. And I thought, well, I don't know.
So let me ask you this. You do have collectors, and that makes sense. I mean, your art is phenomenal, and I think it's very approachable to a lot of people. It resonated with me, and I find it very romantic, You have these collectors. Do they buy direct from you, or do they go through a gallery typically, or is it a mix of...
It's a little mix of that. The galleries are important to a career because, contrary to popular belief, I believe that most new collectors I get are through galleries. And they're not through, I do, a half dozen of these national invitational shows around the country. And I find that most of the people I run into there already know who I am, versus in the gallery, new collectors who've never seen my work, it's generally through the gallery. So galleries are important that way. And I try to really work with my galleries. If I have a collector and they buy work through the gallery and then they try to buy through me, I always run the sale through the gallery so they get their commission, always.
So you're fair to the gallery.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That makes sense.
Because...
you want to be honest.
Well, yeah, it's just that's how you should do business.
Right.
And, I really am conscientious about that. But there are some people who buy directly from me. And
that's the way they've always done it.
Well, that painting I just sold, and that's a woman, I don't really know where I met her. She just wrote me online and wanted to know if that painting was available, and I happened to have it here in the studio. Now, if it'd been in the gallery, I would have directed her to the gallery and paid the commission there. And if it's someone who's seen the painting in the gallery, and the gallery may send it back to me, I'll send a commission to the gallery.
Well, yeah, that's awesome.
That's good business. If they're involved with it at all,
if
I figure that's their money.
Right.
How many? I'm sorry.
No.
How many galleries are you currently in?
I think 4 or 5.
All the way from Texas to Montana. Sounds like.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't. One in Utah, Jackson Hole, Montana, Texas, Arizona.
Okay.
And these are all listed on your website for people that are listening and want to...
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't know if I have a gallery page on there or not.
I think you do.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
I probably ought to update it. It changes every once in a while.
It's hard to keep up on that stuff, too. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Part of doing business is having a presence on the web these days and keeping it up to date.
I find I use Weebly.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's just because I buy another site that has a blind direct on it, so I can use the .com address.
Yeah.
And I have it set up so that when someone goes to my .com address, that redirects it directly to Weebly.
Oh, okay.
And so the Weebly address comes up on top. But it's basically free and it's unlimited. I can put all this. And I also use Facebook as an archive. When I do a painting, I put it on Facebook. and it's free. I can just keep putting stuff on there.
Right.
You know?
Do you do Instagram at all? Because that seems to be...
You know, I know all about. I don't do it.
Okay. Yeah, because that seems like, you know, a lot of imagery kind of stuff is on Instagram. But maybe
I probably got to learn more about that. But
I think us older guys probably are all in the same boat. Like, we need to learn how to use it more.
Yeah.
The younger generation understands the ins and outs of that.
Right.
I talk to people our age, and it's a little
I
bit
just
more
don't want to take the time.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. You don't,
it's a full-time thing.
Yeah. And people that are successful with it, it seems like it's a full-time endeavor.
Although I think I've been on Facebook for probably 10 years. Has it been there that long?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
And I only have maybe, I don't know, 1,400 or 1,500 followers.
Still pretty good.
Well,
That's really good, actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, most artists I know have like max out, you know, what it's 5,000 or something.
Okay.
Sure.
But whenever someone wants to friend me, everyone, I look at their site. If their politics are overwhelmingly ignorant, I delete them. You know, I kind of make a value judgment about the person.
Sure.
And I probably delete 90% of the friend requests I get.
Well, and there's a lot of junk Facebook, you know, fake pages out, so you got to be careful. Anyway.
I swear, young women looking for I don't know what.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Some guys may be complimented by that, but I just find it offensive.
Right.
You know, and then, like I said, I feel like Facebook is not a place for politics, nor is it a place to become educated about anything.
Right, exactly. Right.
So if there's a lot of that, I just delete them.
Yeah.
And I use it. The only thing I post on Facebook is occasionally some interesting historical thing.
Sure.
I get it usually from some museums or something, or my paintings. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't believe in politics on that, and I don't believe in ignorant politics at all.
That's the problem with the internet, is that everybody has a voice.
Oh, and people go on there to get educated.
They just spew whatever, you know.
It's not a place to get any factual information, no matter what you think or believe. It just isn't.
No, I agree.
And,
it is the home of fake news.
Completely. But yeah, my daughters told me about Instagram, and I suppose I don't know. Facebook is enough.
Well, and I mean, you have to kind of draw your line.
And I have a website, and really, I'm not into being famous.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really give a crap if a bunch of people know who I am. I'd rather they didn't, because I'd rather not entertain them.
Right.
You have a comfortable art life, as Bob would say.
just the way I am, and the people that count know what I do, and that grows a little bit every year, and that's how I like it.
Right.
And for our listeners out there, Mike has a lovely home that houses his studio, and it's a really beautiful space, really comfortable, and something he should be proud of, because he worked hard to get this. It's something special for sure. Let me ask you this. Do you work, Bob, he talks about working with people when people are interested in purchasing, and you don't do prints. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so. From what you said earlier. So this is all original work. But if someone was interested in purchasing one of your works, do you have some kind of payment plan or something? If they can't just pony up the money up front, do you work with people as far as? Okay.
Yeah.
This is a question I ask almost every artist.
Oh, yeah. And it depends on how well I know the people. I have a very expensive painting now I sold to some people. And I know them well. They're paying for it $300 a month. That'll be years being paid off. But yeah, I'll do that if I can afford it. Typically, a typical layaway is a third down, and then divide up the payments. What's comfortable with people. Credit cards have made that really easy, because you can set it up to just make an automatic payment every month.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then what I do for affordable art is, I haven't done one in a couple years. I probably will this summer. I paint 5x7 originals, and that's how I generate my ideas. And they're complete paintings, but I put them online, and they're up for auction. That the minimum bid is $100, and then $10 increments. And I sell out whenever I do it. I do 25 to 50 of them and put them online, and people bid on them. And so that's the affordable thing and replace
That's really smart.
prints. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how long do you run the auction when you do this?
They generally have it displayed here or somewhere else, and we'll have a party one night, and I'll let people start bidding on it like a week before online. Then they're all sold out by the end of that party that night.
That is really smart.
That
Yeah.
is.
Oh, yeah.
I love that idea.
Yeah. And, they typically will sell. I've had people pay as much as $1,000 for one. One bunch of people bid again. $10 a whack.
Right. Yeah.
But they always sell out. I've done it, I think 15 times. Sold out every one of them. A couple times I did them here where I had 50 of them up, and you couldn't bid on them online until the party started at 6:00 on a Saturday night. And you couldn't bid online till I set up. I used blog pages for the auction.
Okay.
And I set it up so you couldn't bid before 6:00 that night. There was a line of people at the door at 6:00, and I let them in. We had a great party, and everything sold in 5 minutes. Nobody who called or who bid online could get a bid in.
Wow.
But I was just selling for $100, first come, first served.
That's spectacular.
And I had, I don't know, I think I had 50 of them. And they sold all in 5 minutes.
That's a fantastic idea. I mean, just do the math. I mean,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of like Bob's story about paying off his house.
Yeah.
Or funding his trip to Jamaica.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
And Bob's idea, I did that once when I went to Ireland. And I raised, I don't know, $5,000-$10,000 to go on a trip.
Right.
People bought the work when I got back. People are waiting for them now. It just takes me a while to paint 50 little
small
paintings,
Yeah. It's still time consuming, right? So it's
I can do 3 or 4 a day, but
then that's a great return.
Yeah, one time I had a woman in New Mexico, and she paid $700 for 3 of them. I think they usually average out about $300.
Okay.
That's what, and they're getting an original work of art.
Yeah.
And this is where the business comes in. All right, I decided to do this years ago because sales were lagging, and I first called it 100 by 100 because the first 2 I did were 100 paintings.
Wow.
And I sold them all out in 2 or 3 days at $100 a piece, first come, first served. And then I started doing the auction because people kept complaining they could never get a painting. They were always sold. When I decided to do this, I called a number of people I knew, including Steve Cadre, this guy up in Montana. I said, Steve, what's a walking around price? What's a price you would pay for something and never think about it? You just decide, I can afford that. And I told him I want to do these little paintings. He said, $100. He said, $100 is like a magic number to people. They will spend that and not even think about it if they're attracted to something. And I said, well, what if it was 125? Because I thought they sounded low. He said, nope. You start thinking about it. You'll start thinking about it at 105. But $100, people
all
will
day
just
long.
All day long. So that's where I got the idea for $100. And then I got the idea of bidding on them when I figured out how to do it using blogs. And the other thing, I chose 5x7 because anyone can go to Hobby Lobby and get a 5x7 photo frame, nice frame to put it in, for $10. So they're easy for other people to frame. And I can go to the post office, and their little $4.50 shipping boxes are free, and a 5x7 just fits in it with bubble wrap.
Oh man, that's so smart.
So I charge people $20 shipping and handling, and I get the boxes for free. You know?
What a great tip.
So, and I paint on panels that I make, so it costs me nothing. And they're getting original works of art. I sell them whenever I do them. I sell them all out, and I have people who collect them. They have dozens of them, and people are getting something of value that I can afford to sell out. Now, I'm not selling them a worthless print. So I feel pretty good about that. It's just I've run out of the energy to paint them.
And you said you usually do this once a year, but it's been a little while since you've
It's
done
been
it?
2 years since I've done one.
Okay.
I was going to do one this Christmas, and instead I offered to help a friend set up his own. And I thought, well, I'll just help him with that, and I'll let him use my mailing list and stuff, and then I'll do mine maybe this summer.
So how did he do?
I don't think he got them all painted. I just
Okay.
saw him the other night, and he decided not to do it. I said, okay.
Okay.
But
Really?
he was working on it, yeah.
Because I think it's such a great idea.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. The $100 price point all day long. If it's something I'm really drawn to, I don't think twice about blowing
And you know,
$100.
I've tried to talk other people into going together. Imagine if you had a show and everyone had 10 $100 paintings in it.
Yeah.
You're going to make $1,000. And the trick is not to spend anything on it.
Yeah.
You know, you're out the time it takes. And it takes you 2 days to paint 10 of them.
We're else going to make $1,000 in
2 days.
2 days.
Yeah. When I used to do shows like the show up at the Russell, where every artist has a motel room, you know, and you hang your art in there, and there's like 150 artists in this motel. People come through and buy art. And I would always do that there. And other artists wanted to copy it. And I said, copy all you want. You could do it exactly what I'm doing. I said, can you imagine if every artist in here had this to offer in their room? I said, people would flock in here from all over the country to buy art at $100 a piece. But nobody ever did it. And the people that do, they don't like the $100, so they charge $125, $150, and it doesn't work.
Right.
You know, it's the $100, it's $10 bids, and I tell them, you do it, use a blog page. You take a blog page, right? And each painting is a blog, and a comment is a bid. It's so simple. It's really simple technology, and the computer takes care of it, everything, and you can set up a blog, you know, where you get an RSS back from a comment. So you get an email when there's a bid.
Right.
It's so, and if someone bids here at the party, you just enter it as a comment. It's so easy to do.
It's so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no one has copied it like I have. Although some of them have done something similar, and they'll always sell something at a show. There aren't many of these room shows anymore, but I used to do that at these room shows where you've got a whole room. And, you know, I would always sell 25 to 50 of them and make, if I had 25, I'd usually make $8,000 to $12,000 off those. And
I'm laughing because that's so spectacular. Like,
and
Right.
it draws people in, and then those people buy bigger stuff. So I'm always having these great shows, and the people around me going, oh, well, maybe I ought to do this. I said, yeah, you ought to do this. Let's all do it, and we'll get even more business in there.
Right.
And then they never do.
So if you're listening out there and you're an artist and you're trying to figure out how to make money, this is a really simple solution.
Well, and it's a great way to make some money on a slow month.
Right.
Let's say January is slow for you, and you know that, or you just know like, oh, last month was really slow. I got some bills I got to pay. What an easy way to put it together, you know, some marketing.
The first one I did was in 2008.
Yeah.
The bottom fell out of everything. I hadn't sold anything in 13 months. I do one of these, and I make $10,000 in one weekend.
Oh my God, that's
When
awesome.
artwork is not selling anywhere.
That's, I'll say it again, it's so smart.
And it answered right before 2000, in 2000, I think it was 5. I wanted to feel like I was a business, you know? So I went and took some business classes so I would learn how to write a business plan with the intention of, I want to go to a bank with an idea for a project, and I don't want to get a grant for it. I want to go to a bank and I want to get a loan or financing to do this project legitimately, like I'm a real business. And I ended up doing that, and I ended up deciding I wanted to create a publishing company to do prints, because I thought I wanted to do G clays were kind of new then, G clay prints. Well, I did that, and it was set up by an attorney, and I had a business plan, but instead of going to a bank and borrowing it, I sold interest in it, and it was legal. It wasn't stocks or anything like that. I had an attorney set it all up. I raised $50,000 in a week to create this publishing company. Well, to make a long story short, I paid everyone back, because part of the deal was they got points to apply towards paintings, and they could, like if they gave $5,000, they got $7,500 in points, or it was worth $7,500 to buy paintings. Well, a person might get $7,500 and spend another $10,000 in cash. I made a boatload of money off of that. And I raised this $50,000 to set up this company, and I hired a director, and we did a bunch of editions. And what I discovered was I didn't want to sell prints. I went at it a big way. But the thing is, it funded itself with,
with the
investors.
You were giving something of value to your investors.
Always.
They were willing to buy it.
And the thing I learned was that people who collect original art, at least the people that I was selling to, did not want reproductions.
Right.
They wouldn't even buy them for gifts. They'd buy a little painting, but they would not buy a print. And the other thing I learned was that, so the print market, the dynamic was completely different than the one that I was understanding to sell art. And I didn't have the energy to pursue two. I just didn't want to do it. So I shut it all down, because at that time, my cheapest paintings were like $1,000 for one about this size, and went up to about 8 or 9 at the time. And fairly expensive. And I thought, I want to have something that a normal person can afford to buy, but I don't want it to be a print. And that's where it was my wife's idea, because I had shoe boxes of these little painting sketch ideas where I first start out a painting, and paint it small. All that kind of grew out of that.
So what is the range these days? We talked about the smaller paintings that people can bid on. What is the range? What does it go up to in this day and age?
Well, like a painting that size, 16 by 20 is sort of standard size. It sells for around $4,500.
Okay.
Up to, at auction, I've gotten, $35,000 to $40,000 for a bigger piece.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, since we're talking about sizes. How do you decide what the scale will be for a painting? Is it the subject matter, or just what you feel at that moment?
There's studies for ideas. And then I may paint them a little bigger, and then I feel uncomfortable with that and thinking, oh, I'll do this, and I can do this, and I can do this. And I may end up with, paint that iteration, I don't know, a dozen times, different sizes, changing things. And when I get to the big painting, I know what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is
So I kind of practice that painting.
Yeah, you work it until you get to...
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. A lot of artists do that. They'll do sketches and preliminary things. And sometimes I go immediately to a big painting, and sometimes I don't. But a lot of the times it's from those... Here lately, I've been doing stuff from these small studies. And I don't know how many, I have JPEGs of probably 1,000 of these little 5x7 paintings, so I have lots of resources there. And then I'll, whenever I get an idea, paint another one. You can see up on the bookshelf there, 5x7 is that little kind of card thing up there. But they're easy for people to frame. They cost me $5 to ship. I can sell all of them I want to paint.
Right.
And I'm willing to sell them for $100.
Sure.
People bought them for, I'm perfectly happy with $100.
Right.
It all spins the same, right?
Yep. Boy, it's never failed me. Every time I've done, and like I said, I think this will be the 14th or 15th the next time I do it. Time I've done it. I've done it a bunch, and people email me. When are you going to do another? I call them little Charlies because I used to have a room at the Heritage Inn during the Art Week in Great Falls, Montana in March, which is Charlie Russell's birthday. And I used to participate in the Russell Museum, what was it called? C.M. Russell auction. But I would have an art room over at the Heritage Inn. It was an old tradition for 45 years. You know, they've had this thing, and you had a motel room. They take all the furniture out, you put your walls up, and you hang paintings, and hundreds of people flying from all over the country, or used to go to this. It's kind of gone by the wayside now. And I called it my little Charlie auction. And so I still call it little. Now everybody calls it that. When are you going to do another little Charlie?
That's funny. So when you're painting the small ones, your studies, the first ones you paint, is that on a different medium?
No, in
or is
oil.
it just, it's an oil? Okay.
And they're complete paintings. They're not just scratched out things. I'll show you something.
Yeah. No, I was just curious. And then when did, I'm going to kind of switch gears for a second. When did you switch from watercolors to oils?
I did that in the early 90s. By mid 80s to I was selling some work at art festivals and in some galleries. But watercolors, I had to sell them for not very much money.
Oh, yeah.
And when I started painting on canvas, it was so much easier to do.
Really?
And so much easier to sell.
Okay.
You know, the general public thinks painting is oil painting.
Right.
You don't have to explain it.
Right.
And it's a great medium for my personality because I can paint quickly and scratchy and I can fix stuff. With watercolors, though I would try to paint very painterly, you screw it up and you're finished.
Pretty unforgiving, huh?
Yeah. And having to frame stuff and put it under glass and then having to explain to people what it is. And that's why I switched to oils. And I still do watercolors out on location because I can carry a little watercolor kit with me and I don't have to have all this crap, to paint with. So I'll do that a lot. But it was primarily just, it was easier to sell oil paintings than watercolors.
Okay. That's interesting.
So you strike me as being pretty prolific. You're very disciplined. And
kind of. I'm getting less so.
What would you say you average a year as far as
a number of paintings?
Yeah.
Oh,
just a ballpark.
I would say 75 pieces.
Okay.
Maybe 100 if I do a bunch of little. If I
just
do a bunch of
depending on
little
the size and all that.
Yeah. But I would say 75 pieces.
And you said something very interesting early on, which you don't hear people ever talk about or say as an artist, but you said that you needed to be disciplined, but you need to be disciplined because there's days, and I'm there's days where you might not feel like creating. And, not many people talk about that.
When we're through with this conversation, I'm going to show you a painting I just finished. And I started it and I thought, God, this is never going to work. I can't paint anymore. And we went out to dinner with friends and they were saying, how's it going? I said, oh, Jesus, I started this painting. It just sucks. And they said, well, are you going to throw it away? I said, no, I never throw things away. I leave them for a while and I come back and I almost always make a painting out of it. And it turned out nice. But it happens all the time. You feel like, for me, I go through days and I feel like this is all a fluke. This has been like some genie's been in my pocket and I'm never going to be able to paint another painting. I know it sounds stupid.
So after all these years, you still have that moment.
That's in my head. And I look at a canvas and think, I can't do this. And then I just make myself do it. When I feel like that, I make myself do it. And it always works out. And
they got a thing called imposter syndrome. It's a little different than what you're saying. It's like you think somebody's going to eventually figure out I don't know how to paint.
Yeah.
And, you have that fear that day when somebody's going to say, you don't know how to paint.
Yeah.
Julia Roberts, the famous actress,
Uh-huh.
she had that, if probably still does. And I heard that in an interview. And it's just like, how can you think like one day they're going to tell me I don't know how to act?
Yeah,
so very
and
similar, but different.
The idea of artist block, I mean, I understand it because I have run into it over and over and over and over and over. But you have to go through it. You have to push through it because otherwise it stops you.
Right.
I've known a number of great writers, and they all do the same thing. They say they sit down, and I think, how in the hell am I going to write another novel? I can't do this. All those words, where's the idea going to come from? So they just start writing.
Right.
And great work usually comes out of that. Well, it's that way with painting. And sometimes the block lasts for several weeks. I just sit there and I don't do crap.
Right.
I think, oh, I'm going to go do this. But I always make myself get back to it. There's a great big painting on the wall behind me. It's leaning up there. That's been around here for a year and a half. I don't know how to finish it.
That's interesting.
And I'm about to give up with it. But then here, just in the last couple of weeks, I'm starting to see the painting now. I'm starting to see things that, I think this might work, this might work. I'll get back to it this summer and it'll turn into a great painting. But you can't let that
Stop you, right?
block stop you. And it takes a discipline. It takes a discipline to just push through it, just to make yourself busy. And it's a discipline to believe that it's going to end up okay.
Right. Yeah. So kind of on the similar vein, but how long were you painting till you, and this is going to sound kind of vain, but when you realize like, oh my God, I'm really good at this?
Yeah, I don't know if
Or maybe it's never happened. I don't know.
because I feel so insecure about what I do.
See, that's curious.
I'm never satisfied with what I do.
And I think that's probably true with most.
And I look at somebody else's work and I think, my God, they're so good.
Right.
I suck.
Right.
And
I go through the same thing. No matter what I'm doing.
I think that might be good.
It probably
to not
is.
be satisfied with what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. Well, you hear like the 10,000 hour rule of being a master. It takes like 10,000 hours. Obviously that's some arbitrary number that was invented by Malcolm, I think.
Yeah.
But or somebody
Actually,
else.
it's been scientifically proven.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it scientific?
So it's not arbitrary. It's like they've done studies, but
Yeah.
Well, in Japan they have the whole same kind of thing. But yeah, it's just
See, my Uncle Brian, who was a great carpenter,
Uh-huh.
he didn't believe in that rule because he said, you can be a total putz and you put 10,000 hours in, but 900 or 9,900 of them, you've been doing the same damn crap over and over again.
it's the same damn crap, just number.
He was a big believer. If you don't learn and change, it's just a waste of time. As far as building houses.
Right,
and
right.
stuff.
Sure. That's funny. Todd, you were going to ask something.
So you have, and we've seen this with other people that paint, other artists. Do you have multiple works going on at any given time, or do you really just kind of focus on a handful?
Kind of, because more and more, I used to just paint, mm-hmm. But like this painting behind me, I've been working on the drawing the last couple of days, and then I finished up a couple smaller things that I have to send out next week. And like I may put the sky in and work on the figures, and then set it aside and let it dry, and I'll work on something else. And then I'll come back, because I'm finding more and more I like parts of the painting to be dry, which can take 5 days a week, and then before I go back and work on them. So sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just work on it straight through. There's a painting I can show you later of some buffalo hunters behind that easel, and to do that painting right, it had to be done in stages. Dried paint on dried paint, it can get those effects.
Huh, that's interesting. Because I've seen like watercolors, you can do the wet on dry and wet on wet, and it's totally, the wet on wet's really abstract,
right.
And yeah, it's really cool.
Mm-hmm. And you just have to let the oil paints dry. Mm-hmm. Or some effects, you let it get kind of sticky, and then you do it. It just depends.
Huh.
Or sometimes I just blast through the whole thing, or then there's the ones that take a year to do.
I really like your night scenes.
Uh-huh.
I think those are really special because you don't see a lot of people do that.
No.
But there's something not only romantic, which is a word I used earlier to describe your painting, but there's just a special quality to it. And it transports me when I've looked at those ones that are on your website. I can envision myself on that horse riding at night in the moonlight.
Yeah. And I think most people can relate to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's really special. How did you start doing that? Have you always done that, or did you?
No. There was an exhibit of Frederick Remington's called The Colors of Night at the Denver Art Museum. Well, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And I was just amazed by it. And it was all nocturne paintings. And I spent hours and hours and hours down there looking at those paintings, thinking, how did he do this? And that got me interested in Frank Tenney Johnson, who did a lot of nocturne paintings. And so I just started painting. I like the mystery of the nocturnes. And like you said, it seems like I paint over and over again a cowboy at night on horseback, and like he's night herding, he's like keeping an eye on cattle. I paint that over and over and over again because I think we all relate to that. You know what it's like to sit in that saddle and look at the stars and look at the vastness and the mystery of the night. And I think we all relate to that. And so I'm really drawn to nocturnes. As a matter of fact, I think I inspired a resurgence of interest in nocturnes because it was only after I started doing them and they were very successful selling that I see a lot of artists doing them now that wouldn't give them the time of day, 10 years ago.
Yeah. And it seems, I don't know, obviously I'm not a painter, but is it more difficult to paint a night scene? Or
but you have to learn the colors.
Right.
Because you can't go out, well, first of all, you can't paint a nocturne like it really looks outside because you can't see anything.
Right, right.
What I tell other artists who are trying to learn how to do it, I said, you're trying to paint how the nighttime feels.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
And so it's learning how to control colors and palette and what can you see and what can't you see. For instance, like Remington painted more naturalistic nocturnes. They're closer to how we see at night, although we don't see well.
Right, right.
But his nocturnes more have a feeling of the natural world. Frank Tenney Johnson painted his nocturnes as if the figures in them were illuminated from within. And a lot of times, when you look at the colors of Frank Tenney Johnson's paintings, the colors and the values aren't much different than a daylight scene. But he puts some illumination in it, like an adobe with a lit window that tells you it's night.
It's nighttime, okay.
And there again, both of them are, he in particular, capturing how the nighttime feels, not necessarily how it really appears. And I know artists, and they go outside with headlamps, they're going to paint at night, and I tell them, you can't do that.
I was going to say that would be the worst thing you could do.
Of course, because whatever you're looking at is different and your eyes are all screwed up because of the lights you're using. And I tell them, when I paint nocturnes, if it's a nice moonlit night, I go out with maybe a bottle of bourbon. I just sit around and I look at stuff.
And just soak it in.
Think about it, and I might write some notes down. And I try to put that stuff in my mind because you can't paint those nocturnes on location. Unless it's a street scene with a street light or something. That's a little different, but you just have to remember kind of how stuff look and where the light's coming from. And then, you see like that's a painting of Charles Goodnight. And See, I artificially lit the foreground because you see a little bit more in the foreground than you do. The further back the thing recedes, the lesser you see of stuff. And that's more of a Frank Tenney Johnson type. It's kind of a blending of the two.
Well, I definitely think you capture that feeling. Because when I was looking at Apache Moon and Sabino Canyon on your website,
yeah.
I was definitely transported to that place. And I've spent a lot of time hiking around, stumbling around in the dark or on a moonlit night. And it evoked those feelings that I've experienced
right.
in those times.
Mm-hmm. And
the quality of the light and, it's, that feeling, you really capture it.
Yeah, and I think that's the success to painting nocturnes. You can't reproduce it. You try to capture how it feels to you, and God, I've I've seen these people go out with their headlamps, and I try to tell them, I said, listen, the headlamp automatically is screwing up every color you're looking at anyhow, but your eyes are messed up because you're looking at illumination and then you're not seeing the night.
Right.
You can't see the night if you use headlamps. There's no way to paint this. I suppose you could be even if you're lit in the studio and looking outside, your eyes can't see outside.
Right.
If it's in illumination. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And people don't realize that you don't necessarily, when you go outside and you're out camping or hiking around at night, you don't need a headlamp. If you give your eyes time to
get night
adjust,
vision,
you'll start to see everything.
Yeah.
And you don't need
especially if there's a moon.
Right. Oh, yeah. Especially if there's a moon.
If there's a moon, a headlamp just blinds you.
Yeah.
Because you can't see all the stuff that's very evident otherwise.
Right. Well, I think your point is, what I appreciate about it is you're out there, you're aware of your surroundings, and you're kind of getting in tune with what's really there.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to recreate it, you're just like soaking it all in.
Yeah, and that I think that helps you paint what it feels like.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and your other senses get heightened.
Yeah.
So you really are feeling.
Yeah.
Utilizing those other senses.
I'm trying to control myself. I've done so many nocturnes. People are wanting me to do day turns.
It's day's turn.
Yeah.
So in this day and age, I love the fact that you're so invested in history and you love history. I love history too, and I think that's why your paintings resonate with me. With technology being so prevalent in our society these days, do you feel like, and humanity is a huge part of what you were trying to convey in your paintings, do you feel like we're losing some of that in some ways? Or is just technology just extension of who we are and the natural evolution of what we're becoming?
Well, I mean, technology is part of what we're becoming. I agree with that totally. I don't know if it has to be a bad thing. It's hard for me to get inside someone's head. For me, if technology prevents me from being out in something or somewhere, and technology prevents me from thinking about it and pondering it and wondering about it, then it's a bad thing. And if it doesn't, it's just a wonderful addition to modern life.
So you look at it as a tool, but also if it's taking away from your engagement from whatever it is that you're trying to experience.
Yeah. I mean, I can think about one of the favorite things I used to love to do was when I was in Ireland. I liked to roam the headlands, which are like sheep pastures by the ocean. Because a lot of times that ground is real hilly and rocky and rough. People don't live there. They live back a ways, valleys and things. Well, I love to walk out on those headlands and, you run across a standing stone or a tabla. It's like someone made a gigantic table out of rocks, and those things are Neolithic. They're 4,000 to 6,000 years old. And I'll sit by one of those things and I'm looking down over these cliffs and there's all this water crashing and I'm just thinking about, time. if I had a cell phone or something and it interfered with that experience, I'd fucking throw the thing in the ocean, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when technology's bad. When technology interferes with any part of humankind experiencing their greatest thoughts, it's bad.
Right.
And if it doesn't, it's good. I guess that's how I
That's a
look
good
at
way
it.
to put it, too.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't think it should interfere with any of us being a poet, you know, or seeing or feeling like a poet. It shouldn't do that.
Right.
Other than that, pisses me off more than it interferes.
Hopefully, then my phone didn't piss you off.
No.
I was using it as a tool today because there was certain things
I
I
understand
wanted
that.
because it pisses me off too when I'm trying to engage with somebody and they have their phone out or they're
I
just.
really
not...
resent phones.
I do
I
too.
mean, I don't know if you noticed, it's hard to call me because I don't answer my cell phone. You know, when I was small and we still lived down in Bristol, we lived out on my grandparents' farm with my grandparents. If someone called, they called the store in town, which was 3 miles away, and someone would drive out and let us know we have a phone call, and we would drive back into the store to answer it. And when President Kennedy was elected president, they got a television.
Oh, well.
All right. And when I was in high school, the phones we had an 8-party line and you had a ring. And everybody knew everybody's business because everybody's phone rang on your phone.
Yeah.
You know?
And everybody's
so
listening in.
I really resent cell phones and how friggin' easy it is to just call somebody.
Right. So I want to briefly talk about your Thursday night stuff that you got going on. So you meet with artists or you invite artists into your studio, and it's basically they bring their stuff to you.
Yeah, they bring everyone brings in a piece of work. Usually, you don't have to. You know, we sit around here and we put it up and we look at it and we talk a lot about the selling of art, and you know, I try to help people with what limited experience I have out in the art world. I try to help them find places where I think they might start fitting in, or I suggest to them start learning the dynamic there. And, you know, if you're going to sell art, and but we look at the work and we pick out things we like or pick out things that we would do differently. And I show my work and they help me a bunch, correct mistakes and stuff like that. It's just nice because it's you get out of your shell. You know, this is a lonely business. I mean, I go out to shows and stuff, and then mostly you're just around artists and you drink, tell lies to each other, and you know, it's fun, but you're in a world all by yourself most of the time. And I really like these people coming over. Yeah, it's just a nice thing to do. A good friend of mine he's a genius. He's the only genius I know. He's just brilliant. He's like Leonardo da Vinci, that kind of brilliant. And he just bought a place south of Portland, and he's been emailing me wanting details. He wants to start a studio nights there in that little town, just for getting minds around and throwing around ideas and stuff.
It's important. To connect with people
and to help other people out. You know, there are some of us who are very fortunate and we're able to make a livelihood doing that. And part of the reason is we've been at it a long time.
Paid your dues.
And we paid dues and we've developed skills. And I really believe in paying back, of being, remember how I told you, I feel like my art education has come from all these different
people,
very valuable experiences. I want to be part of those valuable experiences for someone else. And so, you
believe in mentoring people.
Well,
at least sharing ideas.
I don't want to tell someone what to do. I'm not interested in creating untiedlings.
Right.
But I do want to help people. And sometimes I warn people, listen, you got to be really careful about following your heart when you're doing art. I said, and the example I use is, I wanted to be a great musician. And probably the best day of my life, but one of the saddest, was the day I realized I couldn't hear music well enough to be a great musician. I was never going to be great. That was my heart, But I listened to myself and I understood what my strengths were. And I followed my strengths. And it still allowed me to do great things. Yeah. It's just not what I wanted, what my heart wanted to do. And I tell them that, we really focus on at studio nights, picking out people's strengths, particularly if they're just starting out. And I tell them, listen, follow your strengths. With painting, it's absolutely essential. And I said, and when you run into a problem with painting, solve it with one of the strengths that you've identified and you know as a strength. And I said, whether you solve the problem or not is immaterial. What's important is you use your strengths, you're building a voice, you're building that uniqueness that's going to become you. Instead of copying the technique from someone, use your strengths. And you don't care if you solve the problem or not. You're building your voice, your uniqueness. And those are the kinds of things I want to help people out with. It's that kind of thing. I call it following your best steps. And your heart doesn't necessarily show you the best steps because it can be misleading.
Right.
You may want to do something that, I'm sorry, but the harsh reality is your strengths aren't there. Yeah. And there's a good example of a man who comes here. He does brilliant abstract paintings. They have kind of a landscape feeling about them, but they're just gorgeous. When I first met him, he was trying to be an Untiedt. He was trying to paint paintings like me, and he was horrible at it. But he used very decisive, wonderful brushwork. So we started encouraging him at studio nights. Mark, use your brushwork. Forget about whether it's a landscape or not. Just start using that strength of brushwork. And when you're doing something and you don't know what to do, get a good brush and just do it with a brush. Well, now he does these beautiful abstracts that kind of sometimes have the feeling of a landscape about them. But he followed his strength. He wanted to paint like me, but instead he followed his strength and he's doing beautiful things. And now he loves what he's doing. And he very seldom runs into the frustration that he did, a long time ago. And that's how I want to intercede and help people.
Sure.
To help them get that interjection of stuff just like I got from people that seems to help you stumble in a better direction.
That's a sort of mentoring too.
Yeah.
In a community setting as well, which I think is really spectacular, especially like you said, because art is a solitary pursuit a lot of times, and it's nice to kind of break out of your regular routine and get together with like-minded people and bounce ideas off each other.
Oh, absolutely. And they help me all the time. I'll get the same kind of good advice from someone else.
Now, is this open to all mediums or is it just painting?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I've even invited, sometimes there'll be collectors here, and they just bring something out of their collection.
Oh,
and we talk about it. What we like or what we don't like, or what, if we were painting that and we were going to do it again, what we might do differently or not. Sometimes people bring in some craft work they've done. Our definition of art is something you do at a masterful level. I suppose you can bring in whatever the hell it is you want to. We have a photographer. It's really cool. Here about a month ago, he brought in this big poster thing he made, and it was the finished photograph, and then the other photographs that he pulled and took stuff off of and combined to make this thing. It was the whole digital process. That was really interesting. And he was treating his photograph like a painting, exactly like a painting. Everyone just loved that. That was so cool. Yeah, it's whatever someone wants. And they don't have to. We don't have that many people, anywhere from 4 to 8, 10 people.
Okay.
But it's a nice group, and some of them come pretty regularly. And
how often do you do this?
First and third Thursday. You're welcome to come sometime.
First and third Thursday?
Yeah, first and third Thursday.
And people can find this on your website,
Yeah.
correct?
I have a studio nights thing on my website.
Do they have to RSVP or do you just show up?
It's nice, but it's not necessary. All the chairs are over in the corner. I have plenty of chairs. We just sit around here. And I charge $10, or I say charge $10. And if you don't have $10, that's not a big deal.
That's a suggested donation.
Well, the reason I do that is I have a good friend who's a brilliant Japanese woodblock printmaker down in Austin. Her name is Daryl Howard. And Daryl told me years ago, she said, never do anything and offer it for free because people put no value on it.
Right.
So I say it costs $10
Yep.
just because so people value it.
Yeah.
That is so right on. I subscribe to that completely. I think there has to be buy-in,
Yeah.
People want to.
Well, there's skin in the game then.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And then they're less likely to not show, like if they RSVP.
Yeah.
If you don't pay anything, it's like, maybe I just don't feel like going.
Yeah. And like I said, it's not a big deal. I never ask for it. People just come up and pay me.
Yeah.
If they can pay me, and that's it. But I put that on it every time
awesome.
because of Daryl's suggestion. And I've always done that.
No, that's a good idea. Do you do workshops?
I occasionally do things for the local art groups. And then let's see, I did a workshop up in Cody, Wyoming for the Buffalo Bill auction. And I did one, I got back from one not long ago at Fredericksburg Art School in Fredericksburg, Texas. I'm going to do another one there. Those workshops are, I do nocturne workshops, how to paint nocturnes.
Nice.
And it's with Bill and Nancy Bush there in Fredericksburg, Texas. And I don't do many. I feel like there's not a lot you can teach in art, And I'm not a workshop person. I'm a painter.
Yeah.
And there's this old saying, shit or get off the pot. I feel like workshops tend to make people toilet sitters.
Okay. Yeah. Just get out and do it.
Yeah. I'm hesitant about doing them. And for a number of years, I wouldn't do them at all. And then for a while, if a nonprofit asked me to do it, I used to do it as a fundraiser for them. And then I didn't want to pay for them because I didn't want to get into this thing. I'm a workshop teacher. Mm-hmm. But I did 2 this last year, and that's enough. But I don't even like to do workshops here. I don't feel right telling people how to paint. I feel it's kind of pointless. I paint Michael Untiedt paintings. Nuts and bolts stuff that you tend to want to teach at a workshop until people's perceptions are developed to my point. They don't get it anyhow. They never remember it.
Right.
I don't think it's that helpful. I think it's helpful to watch someone paint. But then I don't want people around that much.
Or to call.
So wrapping this up, is there anything you want to highlight for the coming new year in 2020? Things that are on the horizon for you that you would like to talk about?
It's the same routine as shows pretty much. I didn't get invited to the Quest for the West, which was in Indianapolis. That's a show I wanted to do for years. And they finally invited me to that.
That's awesome.
I think the thing in Whitefish, if I were an artist, I would find out about going up there just to list, to find out what Seth Hopkins tells collectors how to build a collection. I want to know that information.
Right.
I think that's a pretty major event. And that's through the Nancy Caudry Gallery in Whitefish. What else? I did an artist in residence up at the Brinton Museum, which is a beautiful Western art museum up in Bighorn, which is 6 miles south of Sheridan, Wyoming.
Okay.
Gorgeous building, built into the side of a hill. Oh, it's just spectacular. And they do this artist in residence thing, and 6 artists go up there and stay on a ranch for 10 days, 2 weeks, and then you get ideas for paintings. Then you paint a show, and I'm doing it with 6 other artists, and I think Lorenzo Chavez is one of the Denver artists who's doing it. We have that opening in September's a big month for me. I have that, and then the next weekend I have to be in Indianapolis for the Quest for the West, and then back to Cody for the Buffalo Bill. The Buffalo Bill auction big show I do, and as is the Night of the Artist at the Briscoe Museum down in San Antonio. The rest of it's pretty much everything I always do. I got a new snowblower, so I'm waiting for
the snow. Oh, that's great. So if people want to buy an Untiedt, or contact you or check out your work, where would they go about? How would they go about doing that?
The best thing is my website, www.michaelomeUntiedt.com.
Fantastic.
And the galleries are listed there. I seldom have much work here in the studio, but you can look at my website. If someone sees something they like, most of it's sold, but I'll be happy to paint something similar. I don't post prices, but I can tell you what it would cost. I don't do business anywhere here in Colorado, I don't think. I think the nearest would probably be, I don't know, Park City.
That or Jackson Hole.
Jackson.
Yeah.
Fredericksburg, Whitefish, Bozeman, Big Sky, those kind of places. That's really the Western art market. Tucson. I've been in this so long, really seen the art markets come and go. One time it was all Santa Fe, and then what's that? Scottsdale and whatever. Now it's kind of spread out a little more. It's kind of followed the trophy homes into the mountains.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. We really appreciate
thank you for coming
taking the time that you did this afternoon and talking with us. There was a lot of you had a lot of great tips and information, and definitely it was an education and insightful. Thank you, and check out his website. We'll have that posted when we post the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was I drove down this morning.
Yeah.
And so it was fantastic. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I enjoyed having both of you here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.